Hello, it's iBookBinding's podcast, and today our guest is Mark Cockram from London, United Kingdom.
From London. Hello.
Mark is a bookbinder and book designer and book artist, or I guess I will ask Mark to describe himself a bit better. And my co-host joining us from Moscow is Pavel Voronin.
Hi.
I had an interesting discussion, if you can call it that, about adhesives. And the person got a little bit irate, saying, "You're so pedantic."
It get very hot very fast with adhesives.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I said exactly. I said, well, I am pedantic because adhesives is the umbrella term. We've got PVA, we've got paste, we've got animal glues, we've got synthetic adhesives, we've got so many different sorts of adhesives, Clucel G, etc., etc. It isn't glue. Glue is made from animals. It's not gelatin. Gelatin, there's always, fish gelatin adhesive. So, and the person, oh no, it's glue. And I'm going, okay, you go to a woodworking studio and you ask for glue, you will get an animal derivative gelatin adhesive. You won't get PVA because PVA is PVA. You ask for PVA in a woodworking studio, you get PVA. If you ask for a nail, you get a nail. If you ask for a screw, you get a screw. It's exactly the same. So you can tell all my students because they go adhesive.
I wanted to ask you one more question about your students. Have you ever collaborated with any of them? Because bookbinding can sometimes seem a lonely business.
Collaboration. I do collaborate. I have collaborated with a couple of students. Not very much because I encourage the students themselves to collaborate with themselves, their peer group. Because if I actually collaborate with a student, the other students might get slightly miffed at that. And they say, well, why are you working with it and not me? So again, I have to create a parity with the students. But I do collaborate. I collaborate with artists, with poets, with sculptors, with forensic entomologists, all sorts of things. I mean, one of the interesting projects I had as far as collaboration was working with the Natural History Museum here in London about burying books. And this is where it was part of a scientific approach, actually. Do you know what a forensic entomologist is? Somebody who looks at dead bodies and then looks at the pupa and the insects and everything around that body to suss out how long that body's been there. And I was working with somebody that did that with the Metropolitan Police, and also worked with the Body Farm in Texas, which is a great thing, not for the squeamish, I hasten to add, to see what would happen to books that were put in similar situations, because obviously insect infestation works in a similar way with the natural products that are found in books, the adhesives, the papers, the cloths, the leathers, etc. So that's where the buried book series started from. So yeah, I collaborate with a wide field of people. And if you think about the act of bookbinding anyway, you are collaborating, albeit from a distance, perhaps a physical distance or a timeline distance. You're collaborating with the author, with the illustrator, with the people that made the paper. You're collaborating with all these different people. And automatically, it is a collaboration. Maybe an unknown collaboration, but it is a collaboration. So again, I look at this from with very wide vision. Yeah, I collaborate. Why not? And I think education is a collaboration anyway. Unwittingly, if you are giving people information, you're sharing what you know and you're doing everything else, surely that is a collaboration. It's a sharing of skills. It's a sharing of understanding, of ethos. It's as much listening as showing and doing. I've got to understand where the student's coming from. The student's got to understand where I'm coming from. So all these different things. Yeah. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. Good question. Yeah. Thank you.
So, Pavel, do you have anything else to add, or should we move to workshop tour?
I have lots of questions, but I can't wait to see the books.
Well, I have to be honest, there aren't that many books in the studio because I sell them. Is it okay if I just have a quick couple of minutes break?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm just...
Me too.
Yeah. Okay. I'll get some tea as well.
Mine's not necessarily tea. Yeah. So I just remembered one thing about education. It is about empowerment. It's about giving people skills. A little while ago, I was working in India in a leper colony, and it's about trying to be flexible with the students, because if you're teaching somebody to sew and they've got no fingers, you've got to suss out a way of getting them to be able to hold a needle to sew a book up. And eventually we managed to sort out that if the guy used a mattress needle, which is a needle about this long, he could just hold it just in that part of his hand and he was able to sew. So it's about empowerment for people. And one of the things about leprosy is it's where I was working. Basically it was a village started by one person, his wife and 3 dogs. They've now got hospitals and all sorts of things there. It's a remarkable place. They, because they need to check what's happening with the leprosy, they have so many x-rays taken that they've got these mountains of x-ray plates. I'll show you one of mine, which is up there somewhere. And what they do, would say they were, what can we do with them? Well, they were putting them in windows and all sorts of things. And I said, well, could you use them for the covers of notebooks, spiral bind them? And they went, do you think people would go for that? And I went, in Europe, they would love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
The macabre, the gothic. And they went, and they're now doing a roaring trade selling notebooks with x-ray plates. That's absolutely superb, but there you go.
I once had an experience of teaching at a facility for disabled people in Moscow, and it was an inspiring experience and educational experience for me, because every person is a different person, and they have their own how to say.
They are their own person. You don't need to say anything else.
Yeah, exactly. So you need to find the personal approach to each student. But in this case, it's even more important, and it's even more interesting for the teacher, because you need to invent some things, and it makes you a better teacher and a better bookbinder. So
yes,
that was a very important experience for me.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm dyslexic. When I was at school, nobody really knew what the problem was, so I was in and out of the ordinary class and in what we would, a class specifically for students with additional needs, basically people with who perhaps think or have different life experiences to ourselves. So for me, school was a very different place, because for some subjects I would be with my classmates mainstream, and for other subjects I would be in the special place with my other classmates. So for me, I was backwards and forwards. So I understand exactly where you're coming from. Each is an individual, and you just have to find that one point, that thing. And once you found it, you can work with them. And they understand that you know. And for them, they're normal. Everybody's normal for themselves. That's it. It's just our preconception of what normal is. And once you understand that everything is normal, everything's normal.
You have to agree there is a certain irony that you, as a dyslexic person, is connected to the world of books.
Yeah, well, this is one of the reasons why I started my career installing Art Deco toilets. You'll find that there is, I built up to it slowly. But again, it was not. This is why when I went to see the exhibition by accident, and started with Gilbert and George, two performance artists they said, right, we are living books. I understood it straight away. And with books of ours, they're beautifully illustrated. And I was looking more at the illustrations. And then as I sort of started this public, everything started clicking into place. And I was very fortunate in that I was able to have help with my dyslexia when I was at art college. Because when I went to art college, they said, right, okay, we know what this problem is. Not a problem, we know what's happening here. As opposed to my school, which was a small country school, but didn't have any, it just wasn't on the agenda then. And so that was a great help for me. And it was the drip, drip, drip of understanding what the book was, but not realizing that one could have a career, work, be expressive using the book. And that wasn't until Paris. That was my road to Damascus moment. It was that, this is where I understand this. So there we go. Anyway, right, shall we go outside? Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Studio 5. This is where I work. It's called Studio 5 because it is Studio 5. It's a nice sort of back part of London, southwest London, in a very beautiful place called Barnes. I work in an environment of old muse properties, and we've got ceramic artists, stained glass artists, recording studios, what else? Art studios, we've got drapers, milliners, and we've also got an aeroplane going overhead. It's London, it's a city, it's like this. Anyway, this is Studio 5, and let's go in. It's a small place, as you will probably realise. I've got a few trays of type, because I do quite a lot of printing. And then as we go into the studio, I'd love to be able to say it's usually tidier. This is tidy. I've got the basic stuff. I've got a small little guillotine, coffee machine, guillotine, board chopper, some more trays of type, and then cloth, inks, print stuff, cupboards with adhesives in, print racks, and then up on the what grandly called mezzanine level.
Okay, that's a nice storage.
That's cool, isn't it? Grandly called mezzanine level, book cloths, dead parrots, kimonos, all sorts of stuff, printing machines.
I also saw some Lowette vertical ploughs there.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. Well, we've got a vertical plough. Then I've got various other ploughs. You can just see one up there in the top skylight. I've got about 4 or 5 ploughs with presses, because people need to know the traditional way of doing things, and of course the modern way of doing things. And then this is where my bench. This is where I'm usually working and doing my stuff. Got a small press just down there for making miniatures. Tiny, sweet little thing.
Oh, that's really nice.
It is, isn't it? It's made out of tank parts from the Czech Republic. That's cool. And then I've got a copy press just there as well, which is good for cool work. The usual sort of presses. Sewing machine. Well, you've got to. Then this is sort of work that's ready for collection and commission work that I'm working on at the moment. So I've got about 6 or 7 commissions I'm working on. Yeah. This is some restoration work that I've been doing. There is an old book, just to show that I do work on old books and do restoration work. This is, we'll look at this perhaps a little later on, but this is one of the cabinets with some of my work in, and some books which I think are quite nice and important, but we'll look at those later on.
I saw some Russian there.
Well, just that.
It says art for children.
Yes, it's because we're all children in art. I'm trying to get out of that one desperately. You'll see splashes of paint everywhere because we do paint. Then there's pre-C19. I perhaps have work areas for 4 people, but that's going to be turned down to 2 people now. Then I've got storage and cabinet. This is cuisine corner with the microwave that a lot of conservators will be very familiar with. Then just this is at the moment, but it would obviously be cleared down, but this is sort of the working environment. So I do have work that's sort of around. So I feel that a place should be stimulating, should be interesting. This is stretched paper ready for an artist book that I'm working on at the moment. And that's a large sheet of stretched paper. Pressing boards, foam, a big sign that says books, which disappears up into the roof. More book cloth. You can never have enough book cloth. Frame, print racks. The occasional birdcage. Why not?
Is it for birds or for something else?
Very small students that misbehave. Then blocking machine, light boxes, plan chests. I've got about 5 plan chests knocking around. A ukulele that I'm working on at the moment, decorating a ukulele. A friend and student of mine gave this for my birthday present. Make your own ukulele. So I've been working on that, as if I'm not busy enough. Typewriters. I love typewriters. Oh, look, another birdcage with a woodpecker attacking a dirty old brown book. Conservators will now be wincing. Posters that I've managed to acquire from events I've attended. That's the Man Booker Prize for Fiction 2005. Big poster. Did manage to liberate that. Screen printing kits, more typewriters, more presses. Work that I'm working on at the moment. This is very recently been finished. This is a triptych, and this is so I just opened this up. This is more about looking at different aspects of the book. If we look at the history of the book with diptychs, triptychs, and polytychs, this is a contemporary sort of manifestation of that. And again, we've got a little bit of collage work happening down here, which is perhaps what people may know my work is about. A manipulated antique-ish photograph of somebody. I don't know who they are. If it is your relation, do phone in. Some more down here as well. Books for research, very important. What else? That's about the studio. More stuff down there. And that's about it. That's Studio 5 in a nutshell, because it is basically in a nutshell. It's a very small place, but we do try and pack it in.
Well, small but functional.
I can't imagine more than one person working there at a time. And you said 4 people working there.
Yeah, well, I do specific. There used to be, before I started spreading out, because students, and there would be 4 working places in here. Because if you go to an average bindery in London, for example, the most expensive thing is space, and it is a luxury to have bench space. So what I do, and quite purposefully, is to say, right, fine, if you outspan your arms, that's the maximum distance of your work area. That's as far as you can work. So literally from fingertip to fingertip, you don't need any more. And it's about your outstretched hand out. That's the size of an average work area. Everything else you're not going to be using. So, and it also teaches the students to keep their benches tidy, to be able to work with space, because so many people, oh, there isn't enough space. Well, tidy up. That's the answer. Then there's under storage as well, with lots of other stuff happening. So that's about it. And this is my laying press, single screw laying press, which is just down underneath the bench here. And that's it. Finishing equipment and all sorts of stuff is, it's in drawers, it's in cupboards, it's, everything's where it should be. Bins full of leather. Yeah, this is about it, really.
What is the oldest tool in your workplace? I think the press looked antique.
Oh, what's the oldest piece of kit in the studio?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a very good question. The presses are quite old. I'd say they're about 120 years old, the nipping presses. This press, I've got a press down here in pieces. This is a standing press. You can see the top platen here and the base platen here. That's a big standing press that I got from London College of Printing. And for those of us who are familiar with the Arthur Johnson Manual of Hand Bookbinding, when he mentions a standing press, that is the press that was photographed. That's about, I'd say that's about 100 years old as well. But I suppose looking at some of the hand tools I've got, they would be perhaps some of the oldest, which are lurking down here. So I don't know if you can just see down here, but for those of us who say he doesn't do any tooling, I do. That's these handle letters here are at least 120 years old, at least that I do know. Stuff was made to last, and looked after. They will do. So that's basically it. Some of the type is quite old as well. I mean, we go on to trays of type, various point sizes, various faces and things. But that's it. And, basically that's it. I mean, work hanging from the print racks is varied and many. The newest piece of kit I suppose I've got is, well, barring the computer, is the board chopper, which is a nice piece of kit to have. Maybe the guillotine. I'm
always impressed how people fit in the board chairs, board choppers in their small workshops, and sometimes it's really small space. Like we had a podcast with Eliana Gomez, a book restorer from Haarlem here in the Netherlands, and she has a total of 9 square meters in her studio, and there's a board chair there. So and that's just, she uses it for so many things. She stores stuff inside under the table. She works on the table when she needs to do some work, and I mean, the thing is that nature dislikes a vacuum, and you ask any bookbinder, any artist, they will quite happily fill that space. So it's amazing. I mean, I occasionally purge the studio of things that I know I haven't used for a long time, and I think I will throw that away. And of course, a week later, you're looking for it, and you think, I know it's around here somewhere. I saw it, and then you remember throwing it out. And so, you've got all these different things lurking around that will maybe one day be very useful, but probably never. So there we go. So I'm sort of don't like throwing things out, basically. I guess it's really hard to keep all the things when you have a studio for 17 years. It is. I mean, I look around at what I've got. When I first started, I literally had a stool, a radio, and a very small table with a couple of hand tools. And that was it. I didn't get any grants or anything. I started with nothing, and built up from there. I mean, it's a question of taking over the world sometimes, I feel, but there you go. So that's that. In the bookcase, some of my favorite books. I've recently just got a couple of books that I've borrowed from a collector that when I was doing my sort of online summer exhibition, again in Facebook. So those are here ready for collection. And that's about it, really. That is the basis of Studio 5. Can you show us some of the books? Yeah, this is part of my buried book ongoing thing, where I'm sort of burying books all the time. And this just shows the beautiful sort of shapes, contours and colours that come out of the ground. And I really do, I love what happens to the books. And it's almost like an archaeological sort of experiment. And again, all these are sort of books that I make. They are my sketchbooks. They're not anybody else's books by any stretch of the imagination. I wouldn't do that. And again, you can see how things delaminate, materials change. But technically, it is a book. Yeah.
The page is still open, they still work, but this is only in the ground for about a month. So you can see that next time you're watching a Hollywood movie and they say, we've just unearthed a 2,000-year-old book, it ain't going to look anything at all like Hollywood has it. But again, you know, it's about using different stuff and that sort of thing, about taking it forward. And then, you know, buried books, perhaps the more experimental view of the book, sort of looking at it from the perspective of reforming and reshaping something. And this is buried, and it's, you know, rigid in that shape now. And again, you know, I suppose one could say, you know, from a restorer's or conservator's perspective, they'd be going, no. But if you're suffering, you know, water damage books and things like that, well, that's how it's done. And of course, all these books are frozen once I get them out of the ground.
Yeah.
Defumigated to kill any microorganisms, etc., etc., etc.
That was my question. How do we store them? Because they're,
yeah. So this is it. But it is one of these things. You know, how far, you know, you can go with things, and there is, I believe, a certain element of beauty of something else in there, and I really do like it. This one is yet to be cleaned. We can still see the evidence of the soil on there.
Yeah.
This is great. But then
I was wondering what put you on this track, because all this reminds me of Cuthbert Bible, the Irish book they found in the bog, early medieval.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is one of the things. Books can be remarkably strong, depending on the environment. I mean, for example, you know, it's so many books or parts of books are being found, are being unearthed, that are hundreds, if not centuries, if not thousands of years old. You know, the Dead Sea Scrolls is just one example. And, you know, they are remarkable things. And this is, if you like, this is a hark back to the Dead Sea Scrolls perhaps within a contemporary context. Now, for example, this book here, this is one that I finished working on a couple of years ago. And this book was buried on the South Island of New Zealand, and it went through 2 earthquakes. And what I've done is I've made a little box for it so you can see it, because, you know, I like it to go on exhibition. And if we take the Perspex cover off, we can begin to see, you know, see it more in its light. Now, you'll notice that there's a hole here, and part of the spine is missing here. That's basically because the person who buried it, one of my students, and then it was dug up by a farmer using a garden fork, and those are the 3 holes made by the tines of the fork going in. I mean, what are the chances of that happening? We don't know, but we can see from it, and it's also, you can see we've got gold leaf and things happening in there, because there's a Japanese ceramics repair technique called kintsugi, which basically, a rough translation is lacquered gold. And when they repair ceramics, they repair it using lacquer and gold leaf and gold powders and platinum powders to highlight the repair. So I thought I would do the same with all the knocks, bumps and lumps with this. And this is number 2 in the series. So we can open the book up, and so it opens. And we can begin to see the inside of it as well. And we can see where the gold leaf, you can actually physically see where those holes have gone through and punctured into the text block. And again, you can see that the gold leaf has been laid into those puncture marks, again, highlighting it. But, you know, it stands up. It is a book. It is recognizable very much as a book, but, you know, in a different format, in a different way that perhaps we're used to seeing. But again, you know, what is the book? You know, this is sort of perhaps harking back to a bygone age, and, you know, the archaeology of things. And again, it's taking it back to perhaps its natural state. So again, this is where, you know, conservation, cross-fertilization from different other arts and crafts and other disciplines can be brought together in the one object, which of course is the book. So, you know, it's not about just, you know, leather, raised bands, bit of gold tooling. There's a lot more to it, as I perceive the book to be anyway. And I suppose one could argue the pages have been, you know, sealed together with various enzymes and everything else, and we can see all that beautiful texture happening just there, perhaps. and arguably say, well, it's not a book, it's only got two parts to it, but this part and this part. Well, one could argue then that this is not a book, and this is a facsimile of a Romano-British diptych, beeswax, carved out wood panels and everything else. Now, that to me is as much relevance and has as much meaning and as much depth as this and this, this and that. So there are this is where I can see definite parallels, definite crossovers, and a definite continuation of the medium. And in fact, if we were to think of these three being together, where we do have the scroll, the diptych, and the contemporary artist's book, then we can see that very definite continuation happening. So that's that bit. Shall we look at some other books?
That's a good question, by the way. What's the book? Once again, we're returning to it, and we had discussions with Pavel as well, because is it a book when it's a collection of wax plates stitched together? I guess it is a book.
Yes, of course it is. Yeah, I mean, it's a three-dimensional articulated structure that has surfaces that are capable of either carrying, having, or being written into, or transmitting information. That is exactly the same as one of my sketchbooks. It functions in the same way. Okay, this is a simplified version. One could argue that this diptych, this triptych here, is another variation on that. For me, that is a book. It's articulated, it carries words, it carries imagery, it opens and it closes. That, for me, is a book. It is as valid, it is as relevant. In fact, probably more so, because this, again, is a crossover piece. And likewise, if we were to think about a contemporary diptych, which is this little chapette here, we can see that this is a two-surface. It's carrying information. It's got two planes. It's got a front and a back, and the book stops here. I don't know if you can see that, but it is available on my Facebook page. The book stops here.
Yeah.
So there you go. I mean, that for me is as relevant as anything else. So it's like when we see a painting and it's got a book in it. You know, the artist has painted a book. That is a book. It's not a real book. It's a painting of a book, but it is recognizable as a book. Is it a book? Well, yes, it is a book. I mean, okay, we could go down the surrealist route and say this is not a book, but let's, you know, leave that for the time being. Perhaps something that's a little bit more recognizable as a book would be this little chap here. Now, I was talking about clay and using clay. Now, if you want to get texture, physical texture into your work, use clay. And this is a mixture of soils, clays from Singapore, and an air-dried modeling clay. So you can really feel and see those different textures happening.
So that's the clay Adeline sent to you?
Yeah. So that's what it's about. And it ties in with the work. And what I'll do is I'll just stand this book up very carefully, because it isn't mine, of course. It is a customer's. But if we look at the spine of the book, can you see how we've got these multiple raised bands?
Yeah.
Okay, and it looks like a ceramic pot, yeah?
Yeah, that's true.
So if we look at a ceramic pot that's got a very similar, and you'll see where the inspiration comes from, this is a ceramic pot. And you can see those self-same lines there. So again, when we're talking about inspiration and where do ideas come from, they come from everywhere, all the time, every time. You know, it's about being open. And I suppose if we were to look at another book, which is perhaps slightly more traditional.
That's a very important moment, a very important point, because for sure there are bookbinders who want to follow the traditions of 17th, 18th century, and they are in their own right. But then it's okay to take inspiration from anything, and it's okay to experiment. And
of course it is.
Unfortunately, there are people who would say no, you should follow the tradition. But
well, in that case, I'd like to know: do they use a horse to go to work every day?
Yeah,
do
exactly.
do they have diphtheria? Do they have rickets? You know, you've got to draw a line and a parallel somewhere. If there wasn't experimentation and people moving forward, we'd still be living in, well, naked, running around gathering berries. You know, one has to live in today's age for the future. But we have the luxury of being able to pick and choose the past that we want to live in. So this is perhaps a more of a book that people may recognize in simple materials. I tend not to put labels and things on the spine because the collectors know where everything is in their collections. And if we were looking at the ceramic book, we can see it has got a label, but there's no text on it. It is just an inlaid panel of the ceramic mixture. And again, on the spine of the box here, we can see we've got this tooled impression. And this is a book, this is full leather.
It was not a trolling tool or something like that you used to make this impression, or what?
If I told you, I'd have to kill you. Because I actually haven't published this yet.
Okay.
And I used to tell people, and then I'd find an article with their name after it using my technique. So
Okay.
I got slightly miffed at that, as you can imagine. But basically, it's a traditional way of working, but with a contemporary lilt. And then the end papers are flottage papers. Again, colors match and everything works. And again, this is working a collaboration.
That's something you do a lot with your works. I mean, this sort of paper.
Not a lot. I mean, I do use it, but I do use other forms of paper, and it ties in with the life of the mayfly. I mean, for example, in the previous book we were just looking at, if I can just close that up, put it back, the end papers for this particular book and the doubleurs are, well, that's not flottage. That's something else. And if you look at it, you can see the outline of ceramic vessels.
Yeah.
And this is actually colored slip, which I've sealed onto the paper. So it's as if color is dripped from the pots or is dripping onto the pots.
And the texture is also reminding of handmade pots or something like that. So
exactly, yeah, it is about ceramics. And again, you know, when we're looking at the doubleur, I don't know if you can see, but can you see we've got a texture of tooling on there?
Maybe you can move the camera a bit away. Yeah, that's much better. Yeah.
Okay, so we can see that shape there. That's a traditional wheel that I've just impressed into the wet clay.
Yeah.
Which is what the ceramic artist did but using different tools. And again, you know, the ceramic artist, he labels and titles his work by pressing letter forms into wet clay. So I've done that. I'm echoing, I've drawn inspiration from what's on the inside, but I've reinterpreted it in my own way. It's not a copy, it's not a follow through. It's a reinterpretation. It's a different way of looking at it, but with similar material manipulation. So yeah, I've got no problem. Yeah.
And this multitude of raised bands is sort of eaten from you to all these people who are making 5 raised bands or something.
I never said that. I never said that. But again, we can take it another stage. I mean, you know, books don't have to be huge, big, and everything else. So I just a minor accident there. In that with smaller books, you can actually have more of a sculptural context. So again, we're looking at different material manipulation, and the book is a fixed backboard binding. So the backboard extends over, and this is a book about basically Dark Ages, sailing ships, death on the high sea, pageantry, kings and queens, and all that sort of thing. So basically what I've done is I've created a book that's got sails on it. So it looks like an old-fashioned sailing ship. And then we've got these tesserae, which hark back to the pageantry and the flags of a medieval age. And that's just done using a cold gold technique, something similar to what Klimt would have used. So, but again, it's drawing inspiration not just from other bookbinders, but from people that use the medium gold and using it in a different way to create something completely different with it. Again, you know, there's a little bit of traditional sort of edge decoration there, sort of thing, contemporary gophering, if you like. But again, it's not just slavishly doing what's before, because that's the only way there is, and that's how I was taught to do it, and that's all I'm going to do. You know, there's got to be, for me, there's got to be more into it. Do you want to look at one more?
Yeah, sure. And by the way, that's one of the books you showcased during your summer virtual exhibition. So if anyone wants to see a bit more and hear a bit more about this book, they can go to your Facebook page and look for it.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It was a stunning exhibition full of glitches. Absolutely super. Now, perhaps we're going to be looking at a book here, which is one of my personal favorites. This is it's a big book, as we can see from the size of the box, 2-tray drop back box. And this, for me, sort of in a way exemplifies one of the philosophies I have about the book. Number one, the boxes have got to be well made, obviously, but this is, when he tries to open it, and it's got a, there we go, that's better. So this is a book, and it's called Shadow Day and Eternity, and it's the work of one of my favorite artists, and this is sort of a homage, if you like. Sorry, I've just pressed a button, and I don't know what I'm doing. It's all right, don't worry. And it's about the work of Joseph Cornell. And I just love the work of Joseph Cornell. I mean, he does it for me every time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put this on the bench, if I may. So everything's going to go a bit squiffy for a while, okay? Yeah. It's a big book. It's a very big book. And I wish I had a tripod and everything. But anyway, for those of you who are not familiar with the work of Joseph Cornell, he is very often cited as the artist's artist. His work is sublime. It is beautiful. He helped organize the first Surrealist exhibition in America. A very influential, an extraordinarily gifted person. Never traveled outside of his own location, but he traveled the world with his work. And what I've done is I've created the work of Cornell. Now, in a lot of Cornell's work, not a lot, but some of his box art, he uses sand. And I don't know if you can see, but I've got sand in the cover as well. And we can see that black line working there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so what this does, it sort of echoes what's happening. And this will take a few minutes to sort of decant from one area to the other. So this is what I mean about books working both upside down and the right way. The only way to actually get this to work is to turn the book upside down. And we can see how this is sort of going out of here.
Yeah, so you are making the user of the book to break the rules as well.
Yeah, exactly. To engage with it, you've got to work with it. So that's that one there. And I've got a beautiful reflection of myself just there. And so that's doing that. Now, if I turn it the right way up, or a perceived right way up, we can see how the top sand will start to disappear. And this really does give a beautiful sense of movement, and it really is something else. And I hope this is all in focus. I'm doing this freehand, of course.
Yeah, we can see that it moves. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But it's the light catching the particles, and then as the sand slowly disappears, and it is doing its stuff, see this beautiful shape appearing, and then this eye that looks back at us reappearing.
Oh, that's very poetic.
It's beautiful, isn't it? Look at that. I love it.
Fun.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. I love it. It's just one of these things. So that's that. But when we go into it, and of course, you know, it's got sewn end bands. It's got a little bit of edge decoration. But we can see this brie collage work as well, because again, that's what Cornell worked in. He was a self-taught artist by and large. He did attend the evening classes and stuff, but he was self-taught. So this is echoing his sort of working style. And if we go into the book, again, we get this follow through with colors, with various different elements happening, so that when we open it, we end up with the work very similar, but inspired by what he did. So Eternity means, you know, everything is going into eternity. But again, we're looking at this in reverse. The foreground is actually smaller than the background. We can see how that collage works there. And then we've got the profile of Cornell in shadow. So that's that one there. Now, the backboard, I have to say, is my favorite, because I play with this quite often, though it is available, of course. This is a backboard, and it's basically a thing of sand, and you can actually move the sand.
Oh, wow.
So that every time you open the book, you form a new and completely different book in itself. So it's a different book every time. And then when we go into the back doubler and pages, we can see that continuation happening, asymmetry within the end papers. And that's Shadow Day and Eternity, Joseph Cornell. So again, it's about taking inspiration. It's about looking at the work and not, I mean, if I were to put that book in a full leather binding with a bit of gold tooling and 5 raised bands, it would be wrong. It would be completely wrong. So by treating it as a contemporary work, by physically looking at it, touching it, feeling it, and it being inspired by the work that's in the text block, then what you have, of course, is you have the holistic approach to bookbinding and book art. Is this book art? Well, I suppose it is. And of course, the original book came with a DVD, whatever it is. So that's in there as well. So again, you know, that's a manipulation of materials and manipulation of an art or way of working with art and design. And we can just see that the box closes down like that. I like boxes. And that sort of thing. So that's basically it. Would you like to look at one more?
Yes, but let me just say that this was amazing. Swear if I ever saw one. This was mesmerizing. Wow. Thank you.
That's just no problem, no problem. If we think of what we've just looked at, and we think of that moving sand, and then you think about concrete poetry. Now, concrete poetry is a number of different things to a number of people, but it is the possibilities of the letter and the word forming and reforming to create a new visual text. Now, the visual text does not have to be in type. It can be in anything. So what is the step? What is the next logical thing to do? Or perhaps to create a book or book object which works with that. So this is a book. We can see it's a diptych. It's got 2 surfaces. It opens, but within the text block, the single page, if you like, we have sand. So again, what I'm exploring is how the sand keeps shaping and reforming. And if we were to look at those in an abstract way as lines of type, of words, of letters, again, every time we pick this up, we have a different vista, a different way of looking at this single page. And all of a sudden it becomes not a static thing, but it becomes a kinetic book, a kinetic text, which is able to, revolve and evolve around the person who's using it, understanding it, and engaging with it. So that's a simple form. So that's a combination of box making, of bookbinding, book arts, and again, about understanding how books and art can work together, and that there is a synergy within the form and the function of the book. So I'll just put that to one side. That's good. Yeah, okay, right, fine. Exotic tours. In today's age, it's the cult of the selfie. And for me, the box also becomes an extension. And again, this is on the Facebook summer exhibition. The box becomes an extension of the binding itself. It's rather like the frame for a painting, if you like. It's the theatre curtain. Just as the play or the orchestra strikes up, that curtain opens. The safety curtain opens, and we get into those lush things. We get this idea of what's happening. And then we can open the box up. And again, my box making, there we go. And we open this up into exotic tours. Now, when I've traveled abroad, I see many groups of people going around exhibitions, going around cultural buildings, architecture. And what they're doing is they're not looking at the architecture, they're looking at themselves in front of that architecture through the camera, through the selfie. It's the cult of the selfie. So we can see that with this, again, this binding is a full cloth binding. That's animal friendly to our vegan friends. Again, this is hand painted, hand sprayed. We can see that, again, it's this 360-degree view. And you'll see that all the images and things, they have overlays, collage work that's been put over them. You can basically see that, where it is the cult of the selfie. So we have some quite well-known works of art and lost art in this as well, where we start exploring sort of the tour, where, again, we're looking at how we don't look at the work, we look at ourselves first, or themselves first, and the exhibition or the tour becomes something that is forgotten. it's not important. It's about how we see ourselves within that environment. So again, we go through this, and again, we've got, crude, popularism, all sorts of text that revolves around it, the myth. And again, you've got icons in art and design, culture, history, the environment, and it's all sort of lost to the cult of the selfie.
Every time I go to the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, it amazes me how many people are making selfies in front of the Night Watch or other famous paintings. And my question always is not the mouth question, just something I speak to myself. Why would you do that? Because you can have a digital copy of the painting on the web. You can have pictures of you anywhere else.
You can buy T-Town.
What this photo, what this selfie gives to you, and what it brings to.
What it is, what I believe it is, it's a self-imposed form of, gosh, aren't I educated? Look where I am. You can tell where I am because, you can see where I'm in front of. And look at this wonderful piece of art, but I'm more important. It's a very selfish attitude, I think. And I think that, it's about education of people's expectations and how they feel that they should see the world. But less about that. That's more of a philosophical thing. So this is surviving material. And this is a hand-decorated book cloth. Again, it's not just leather that we can bind and decorate. We can actually use book cloths. We can use all sorts of things in our material. So again, this is about material manipulation. And it's also about seeing different things in different ways and being able to manipulate all those materials. And again, this is a drum leaf binding. And again, this is using silk screens, stencil work, hand painting, collage work again. And this is basically about surviving. It is about looking at how images, when you start to distort them, what is seen and what disappears, what survives in the eye, and how we can, work with a selection of titles, if you like, that keep a sort of modernist, perhaps figurative way of working within a very simple format of what material survives. And
this is also a psychological experiment because our brains are hardwired to find some patterns and.
Yeah, exactly. You think there is a narrative, there's an obvious narrative, and the narrative is created with the imagery and also the way that the color has been applied and that sort of thing. But what it is you can actually physically see as the silk screen is used, the image degrades and you start to lose detail within that uncleaned sort of silk screen. And again, it's about what we see, what survives, and what we mentally put in its place to create the completed image. So again, it's basically asking questions, all sorts of things. Why, what is survives? Why does it survive? So again, there's always more than one way of looking at work. So yes, I work within the contemporary traditional way of working, I suppose. And I work within book sculptures, book art, printing, all sorts of things. Again, it's about a very much of a holistic approach to the work and to how we can perhaps engage and see different things. And again, my inspiration comes from all sorts of things: Cornell, Peter Blake, the list goes on and on and on. Mel Gooding, Rothenstein, etc., etc., etc. And again, it's also about looking at the traditional aspect of the book as well. I don't just sort of go, all right, modern. Some of my favorite books are relatively old. They're only 200-300 years old, sort of thing. So I do look at those, and I do gain continued joy and satisfaction at being able to look and share in that sort of style of work, the antiquity of it, the beauty of it, the essence of what the creators were doing and what they achieved, and how I can continue to share in that.
What do you think about the work of Grayson Perry? Because I look at what inspires you, and you and him seems to have a very similar set of heroes.
I think that what Grayson does, he's kick-started ceramics in the UK, that's for sure. But he's very media savvy, and he uses the media. So this is a book about bookworms. I just sort of say bookworms. So it's got holes in it, and this is for any conservator out there. They're now going, "Oh my god!" But this is bookworms.
I have something to show you, I guess. Just a moment. Here is the book I bought in Bucharest.
Beautiful.
Some time ago, and I didn't need the book, of course, but I wanted to buy it just because it's amazing, and it's full of holes, and you can see it here as well.
Super. So how many? So you bought that?
Yeah.
Yeah. These are for sale. If you want to buy.
Yeah.
No, I think that it's Grayson Perry. It's a very interesting guy, very media savvy. He has kick-started ceramics and applied arts within the UK, that's for sure. And it's very easy. It's very easy. He's been doing art and craft with Grayson Perry during lockdown, which has been apparent. I haven't watched it, but apparently it was well received by people who make arts and craft toilet roll covers and stuff like that. But I think that his approach is, again, a very holistic approach. I mean, he's the first person that will say, he doesn't really have any training. His ceramics training was done in an evening class, and he shows quite happy to talk about his earlier work. And he will, he's very enthusiastic. And yes, he does gain his inspiration from all manner of things, from antiquity to the contemporary, and he uses them. And he also uses contemporary production methods, contemporary ways of working and also to sort of make his work for now. He's not trying to copy a Ming vase. He's doing what he's doing now. And I think that's very, very, very important, because a copy will always be a copy. An original is always an original. Oh, that was a good note to finish on, wasn't it? I've got to remember that.
I also wanted to show you that this book I bought in Bucharest struck a note because of its topic and title. So it's about Nicholas I, Russian emperor. So it was twice as good for me because of the worms and because of the Russian emperor.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how you do get that essence of things just being right and being perfect. But again,
exactly.
From the conservators' perspective, they go, "Oh, it's got to be. We're going to look after this. We've got to do that." But it's beautiful and it has resonance in its own right as it is. Why change it?
Yeah.
Why change it? There's no need to change it. It's one of those things. Yeah. I mean, with a lot of my books, I have editions of the illustrated London News, and I just love them the way they are. They've obviously been used, and they were in a public library at one time. And I get a lot of my work from that, and I look at the way they've produced and stuff. So yeah, again, it's about looking and seeing and getting stuff sorted out. Look at the way I look after my books. It's great, isn't it? Oh, that's the first aid kit, by the way. Just got to get that in from a health and safety perspective.
That's important. Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
especially when you have lots of sharp things around you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Last time you forgot to ask, who would you like us to interview next? Can you name some person who would be as fun to talk to as you are?
As fun? I think if I were to suggest anybody, I would not suggest a single person. I'd suggest students who are just starting out on this wonderful journey that I'm sort of halfway through, because the students, they're the future of what we're doing and the world that we are in. And I would personally be very interested to know, you know, where they see themselves when they get perhaps my age or as many years doing what I've been doing, and the direction that they see the book, this huge genre umbrella thing, where they see it going in the next 20, 30, 40, 50, 200 years time. Because I think they're the important people, along with, you know, future collectors, future things. And I think also in sort of interviews and things like that, collectors tend to be not thought about, but they're a very important part of the whole world of where we are, in that without people that want to engage with what we do, you know, want to share and to pass on what we do, what I do would be not important. I mean, Picasso used to say that art is worthless unless it's seen by people, you know. So the collectors are very important, and you know, the critics that write about the work that we do and disseminate, and the journalists that are involved in it, they're vitally important, but they tend to be overlooked. You know, yes, makers are very important. The artists, the creators, whatever, are important. But without everybody else, you might as well be in a closet doing something to yourself very privately. So, you know, it's for me, who would I like to see? Students, collectors, curators, and critics. That's what I would like.
It would be great to talk to a collector. The problem is they tend to be very private people.
Yes, the secret is public institutions. They have to justify all the money that they have. Now, this is between us. Get them and say, look, you're a public library. Go with more public. Get your voice out there. The collection at the V&A, the National Art Library, is something else, I have to say. But there are many, many more institutions that do collect the work. There are some collectors who are very happy to talk about their collection. And what I will do is I will give you their names privately, just in case they say no, and I wouldn't want to embarrass them by giving their name now and then going, no, I don't want to do that. No.
Yeah.
But yeah, collectors, very, very important.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting, and it sort of shifts us out of our box, because I was focusing on inviting, you know, paper makers, marblers, bookbinders, book restorers, and you bring absolutely different perspective, and that's an interesting thing, and that's definitely something we should do in our future podcast.
Yeah, you know, everybody is important. Everybody has their own identity and their own reason for what they're doing, and you know, one cannot operate or exist without the other. There is that relationship, and yeah, I'd be very interested to know why collectors collect, what they look for in work. And it doesn't necessarily have to be about books or whatever, you know, where they get their inspiration from to collect, you know, why they do it, you know, that's something else, you know. But anyway, you asked the question, you've got the answer. Not necessarily the answer you were wanting, but you've got an answer. Actually,
this is a great idea. I would be very interested to hear what collectors want.
Well, yeah, to not say, well, they know what they want, but it's why they want it, what it is. I mean, some collectors, you know, stamp collectors, for example, they want, you know, the first or the rarest or whatever it is. Now, with bookbinding and book arts and that sort of thing, it isn't necessarily the first. It's not necessarily they may collect a specific edition of something. So many variables. I mean, it's wonderful. But, you know, I go around to people's houses and I think, well, why have you got that? It's awful, but you like it. Why do you like it? You know, why haven't you got more of my work? It's beautiful. It's wonderful. You know, so yeah, I'm very interested in that side of things. Very interested. Yeah.
Okay, we'll try. We'll try to find some people to to agree to join our podcast as a guest. I'd like to say thank you to Mark for being such an amazing guest and showing around his studio and talking about all these different things. And I also would like to thank our community of iBookBinding and our supporters on Patreon. We have a collection of digitized books there shared with everybody now during the lockdown, so you don't need to become a patron and pay any money to us to access this collection, at least for now. And you still can become a patron, and we would highly appreciate it. But yeah, that's optional. We will announce our next guest in our future posts on our social networks. And yeah, I guess that's it. Thanks a lot, Mark. Thanks a lot, Pavel.
My pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
My pleasure.
This was great. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And cut.